my life crumbled. It all broke apart, and really beautifully broke apart. At the time, it hurt a lot and pushed me into a depression, years of depression, of not knowing who I was, feeling very lost and confused, paralytic, fear, dread in my gut, anxiety, which I'd never had.
I am so excited and deeply grateful to have such an inspiring, authentic, and really empowering guest on the show. John, thank you so much for your time here, and welcome to Empowering Vibez.
Hannah, thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, it's an honor. I know we tried to do this a couple of times, so let's hope we can do it properly this time.
Yeah, I'm so excited it's finally happening. So thank you so much for your time. I would like to start. When I was preparing for the interview, I was going on your Instagram and I saw you teaching a lot about authenticity and that this really matters to you. And I wanted to start with asking, was there ever a time where you feel like you were not living in alignment with who you truly are?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually backwards. So when I thought I was being authentic, I was actually being inauthentic. See, when you're actually being authentic, it doesn't even cross your mind. You're just being you, and you don't question it. Whereas the times where I questioned it and I thought, okay, now I'm being authentic, I was actually forcing myself to be a certain way, like molding myself to be a certain way. And so, yeah, everything started to fall apart in life, really, when I wasn't living. Really, it's when you're living truly to your high, you'd call it your higher self, right? And that word gets thrown around a lot. In my teachings, I talk about the soul, and there is the sort of animal aspect of you, which is, and the mental aspect of you, which is all of your conditioning and beliefs, and that is the inauthentic self. And then beyond that is the true you, the true self. So, yeah, there's definitely been times where I've been led by my mind, my whole life, really. And all of those beliefs that we picked up through childhood, our value systems, whenever we feel like we need to be a certain way to fit in, to be loved, to feel safe, to appease someone else, all of that is inauthenticity, and we go off of our true path. And we all do it. It's kind of like we're a snake slithering. We might be heading in a direction, but every now and then we go a little bit too far left, a little bit too far right, and the universe will give us feedback, whether it is we get physically sick, whether it is they bring someone into your life or our lives, which is turmoil. They bring turmoil or chaos into your life. Things won't work in business. All of this is a sign of lack of integrity, lack of inauthenticity, or lack of authenticity. And it's just about coming back to center, and you play there for a while, and then you go off on another tangent again there was a time where I just wanted to earn money. And so that was my main drive. And I stopped being true to my core, to myself, to go and do that. So really, I think there are 4 things that pull you away from authenticity. And that is the need for to feel safe or in control. You'll sort of bypass your own values in order to get that. You can also do it through wanting to be validated, wanting to be special, wanting to be important, wanting to grow your status, to get likes on social media. You might do something that is inauthentic so you get the hits of dopamine, or you get that validation. We also do it when we're bored. When we're bored, that's a perfect time to be our authentic selves. And a lot of people get bored and then they go and chase some kind of excitement or stimulation, might be socializing, purely because they are not, again, living by their purpose, their highest values. And the last thing is love. When we're not feeling loved, if we feel alone, a lot of the time, and this happens in relationships, people sell themselves short in order to be loved and to be accepted. And so they're the 4 kind of driving forces that pull us away from authenticity, and we start being someone we're not.
What did your life look like when you live this inauthentic version of yourself compared to what you're doing now and your life is looking like now?
Yeah, on the outside, it looked tremendous because it was, so that I talked about the 4 things that pull us away from authenticity. And the way it plays out is through different patterns of behavior. So people pleasing is a really common behavior pattern, which is someone being inauthentic. They're essentially pleasing others so that they get accepted and they fit in. Another way is through becoming a high achiever. A high achiever, again, is a pattern for validation, for recognition. And so that's what I did. A lot of my life was, I'm a Guinness World Record holder, national bodybuilding champion. I built a very successful coaching business really quickly, spoke on big stages alongside people like Tony Robbins, Dr. John Demartini, Deepak Chopra, Robin Sharma. And it's kind of like pseudo success because you're doing it as a means to an end. If I do this, then I'm good enough. If I do this, then people will love me. And there's only so long you can do that for, because inside you're always playing catch up. It's not abundant. It's a lack mentality. You're always chasing something. And, everyone to a degree is chasing something. However, the energy driving it is a driving force of, I need to do this in order to feel worthy, instead of, I'm totally abundant. I love who I am, and I'm going to do it because I love it. And that's the real difference between an inauthentic expression is, it's like an if-then. If I do this, then I'll get loved. Whereas the authentic expression is, I'm already loved, so I'm going to do the thing that I love most. And so when I was living that way, you're kind of building this, you can call it an ego, you can call it a persona, a facade. You're kind of building this, and it gets heavy to maintain because it's all a lie. It's all an illusion. And that's what broke me eventually. I could no longer just people talk about imposter syndrome and things like that. It gets to a point where some people just keep doing that, but I couldn't live with myself. So my life crumbled. It all broke apart, and really beautifully broke apart. At the time, it hurt a lot and pushed me into a depression, years of depression, of not knowing who I was, feeling very lost and confused, paralytic, fear, dread in my gut, anxiety, which I'd never had. Growing up, I was, in the military, very focused, disciplined. And so this really turned me upside down, and I fell into 3 years of depression, couldn't get out of bed, trying to sort of maintain this persona I'd created, but it got to the point where it was just too heavy, and it dropped me to my knees. And when I finally surrendered, that's when I started to really learn about authenticity. It's like, well, who the hell am I? If I'm not all of this success, if I'm not all of the business I've created, the money I've made, who am I? And that's when the exploration started to discover, I call it the science of authenticity. It is a science as well. And so the journey became about putting myself back together, finding out who I was, finding my true purpose, and then from that point, expressing myself authentically. Instead of, what it felt like previously, Hannah? There was a bit of panic inside me all the time. Like I need to be doing this. I need to be doing this. And it's like you're juggling or spinning all these plates, and you've got to show up a certain way for some people, show up a certain way for some other people, so that you're getting the benefits from all the people. And that's hard work, And so now I get to spin the plates I want to spin, happy internally. There's no panic. There's a grounded feeling, and everything becomes clear. And the biggest thing is that fear disappears, because you're no longer fearing judgment. Your self-worth's no longer, for me, it was tied to money, and I made a lot of money as a coach and then lost a lot of money. And with that, my self-worth was just through the floor. And so I had to really learn, who am I without money, And then from that foundation, that grounded foundation, really, really dig myself out of this hole and rebuild my business from a hole in the ground, essentially.
Thank you so much for your honesty and your vulnerability. We share a lot of similarities in our story. And I know that it's not easy to share all this, like, very, like, close to the heart, all these things that just are like our deepest selves. So thank you so much for your honesty. And I'm sure you will impact lots of people with that. So thank you. It's so important that we talk more about that.
Yeah.
That's why I would like to ask you, like, what are the things, because there's so many people struggling with depression. And I have two questions. One is regarding self-worth and one is regarding shame. So the first one, let's talk about the shame, because I feel like so many people, and I experienced this myself, that I built a successful brand and then I started to struggle with depression and I just vanished of social media because I was so ashamed of sharing how I'm feeling. And it was basically that I was ashamed of who I was at that time. And this is a feeling I don't want anybody else to ever experience because it felt so terrible. And I don't know, did you struggle with shame as well? And if so, what helped you to deal with it? And for somebody listening who's right now in exactly that situation, no matter if it's depression or anxiety, what advice do you have?
Yeah, fantastic questions. I'll do my best to answer, and if I go off track, just bring me back. So I went through, during the 3 years of sort of depression, I went into a few relationships, but I was really looking for someone to save me. If I can be completely honest, there was an underlying factor, an unconscious factor. I was looking for like a mum, essentially. And one of them the connection was amazing, and it was very potent, and she actually ended it, and that broke me. That dropped me to my knees big time. And that's when I really felt unworthy and not good enough. And I remember there was another girl, I was crying on the bed and I said, why do you love me? Like, why do you love me? Because I don't even love me. I think I'm worthless, right? So there was a lot of shame. And it got to the point where I just had to admit it. I was like, I feel like a piece of crap. And I went to I've got like a meditation space in my house. And I went there and I remember crying for about 4 hours. And the shame, the different, like, depression sort of sat on my chest, but the shame sort of sat down here in my stomach. And I remember I was vomiting for about 4 hours, crying, wrenching, vomiting, trying to get this out of me, trying to just clear this from my system. And after 4 hours, I realized that you can't get rid of shame. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Shame and pride they're feelings. Same with depression, it's a feeling. Same with happiness, it's a feeling. They're all feelings. And so they're part of being a human. So trying to get rid of any of those parts is essentially trying to get rid of part of yourself. It's just not possible. You can't do it. So I tried it. I tried it for 4 hours and I was like, this is futile. This shame, it's part of me. And then the more I read and learned, I realized that pride and shame were sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum. I call it the positive aspect and the negative aspect. And you can kind of think of it like a bowling alley. If you have, pride is one of the gutters, shame is the other gutter. You can't go higher than pride and you can't go lower than shame. But the truth is, to get a strike, you want to go down the middle. People think they want more pride, but there's a saying like pride before the fall. Before I lost all of my money and things like that through coaching, I was making, there was one weekend I made $350,000 in a day selling my programs, and I did a couple of days where I made over $100,000. And I was full of pride. I thought I was the best in the world, and then the universe really humbled me and knocked me down. And so we're always on the scale of like pride and shame. And my goal and what I teach, I've got a free course called Discover Your Authentic Self, and it is all about the center point between pride and shame. So if you become too prideful, you'll get smashed. You're going to find people coming up, challenging you, tall poppy syndrome, criticizing you. The universe will be doing that to humble you. And if you find yourself deep in shame, the universe is going to send people in to support you and help you. This is the victim and the victor. Now, a lot of people want to be the victor. And again, I won't go into it too much in this podcast, but essentially, if you try and just be the victor all the time, you're always just going to come up against challenge all the time. And you won't be, that is a pattern of inauthenticity, wanting to be the champion, wanting to be the victor. You want to be the victim and the victor, depending on different times. Because the victor accepts help from people, the victim accepts help from people, and the victor is essentially the giving of help. And so we want that yin and yang. We want that to and fro. And so I realized that I couldn't get rid of shame. And so instead of trying, like, resenting it and not wanting it to be there, I did the opposite. And I decided to love that part of myself. And so shame really drives everyone. It is the core wound. If anyone has ever experienced the feeling of not good enough, at any point in their life, they've experienced shame. It's the bottom of the barrel. When you experience that shame as a child, it's going to drive you to become a certain way. And that could become like the high achiever it was for me. At school, I was the class clown. So I used humor to deflect things away from my shame. Some people become introverted, and they study and they use intellectualism as their way of avoiding shame. So everybody's really driven. It's one of the core intrinsic drivers is the feeling of, if I'm not good enough, then I'll do something about it. So that's the first thing I'll say is you can try and get rid of it, but it's always there. And so just acknowledge it and love it and use it as a guide. Like, okay, I've gone too far into doubting myself. I've gone too far into feeling unworthy. I've gone too far into being a victim. It's just a sign that something in your life needs to shift. That's all it is. And the more intimate you become with your shame, or any of your emotions, but we're talking about shame, the subtle, you'll feel it subtly, and then you'll be like, okay, I know that I'm off center a little bit. I'm not being authentic. I'm being driven, I'm experiencing my shame and being driven by my shame. Okay, go and meditate. I've got some processes to go through to bring myself or anyone else back to center. So the more intimate you become with your feelings, the more you can feel what's driving you, where it's coming from. Am I doing it to get away from pain? Which is shame, not good enough. I'm going to then do something to not feel that pain. Or am I doing it because I want to experience pleasure? And so you become really attuned with what's driving you. And what you want, the goal, is to be driven through inspiration, not by pain or pleasure, but through your true purpose and your life's calling. So a good example I use for someone who's experienced chronic shame and then gone right out to the pride side is someone like Andrew Tate, who a lot of people know. So do you know Andrew Tate? Okay, so he blew up on social media. I won't talk too much about it if you don't know him, but essentially became a really strong, you would call it like alpha male, the typical alpha male. And so he became a world champion fighter, kickboxer, and made a lot of money and is very dominant, very alpha. And then if I said there's something, I said I can guarantee it, to the degree you become an alpha for men, or to the degree you become hypermasculine, there is going to be the equal degree of shame that's driven it. And so I looked into it and I discovered that, there was a girl that had pretty much told him that he was a piece of crap and he was weak, and that's shame. Like, that is, touching on your wound of shame. And so what did he do? He was driven by that pain and he became a kickboxing champion, right? That's like a layer of defense. It's like, I am good enough because I'm the champion. And then he went and made millions and millions and millions of dollars. There's another layer of defense. So he's got layers of defenses against his shames. Some of us have layers. It could be our career. It could be our personality, the way we act and behave. As in, we could isolate ourselves, or we could become really successful. We could hide behind I'm a doctor. All of these things are means for us to avoid feeling our deepest shames. So I hope that answered your question on shame. And when it comes to depression, again, just a feeling, just an experience. It's not a label. It's not permanent. It is just a feeling we get. I believe that comes from having expectations of how things should be, and they're not. And they're not like that for a long time. And so we start to beat ourselves up. We start to feel our shame, our not good enoughness. And when that is chronic and we don't see a way out, that's when I would say sadness becomes depression. It's like, okay, this is what I expected. It's down here. That gap is like the gap of disappointment, you could call it. When that's there for a long time and you don't have an inspiring future, you can't see a way out, that's when the apathy sets in and you just say, what's the point? What's the purpose? There's no purpose to life. I feel like crap. Nothing's working and I can't see a way out. So I may as well not be here. And that's obviously not true. There was a man that wrote a book about depression. I don't remember his name. I've only heard the story, but he was suicidal and he stood up on a bridge and jumped off the bridge. And as he jumped off the bridge, he had an insight that there was a voice, his higher self, his intuition was like, every problem has a solution. And I 100% believe that. There wouldn't be a problem if there wasn't already a solution. They're two sides of the same coin. They come as a whole. And he had that insight as he was dropping. Anyway, he hit the water and he actually lived and he wrote this book. And you know, when I was in the deepest of the depression, I sort of knew that was true, but I still wanted to kill myself at times. And I remember I flew to New Zealand to see a healer. And I finished an hour-long healing session. And she asked me how I felt afterwards. And I just said, I just want to fucking die. Like, I feel miserable. I just feel heavy. And for years, this was there. And, you know, you've experienced it. It's like, there's no way out of this. And I really thought there was no way out. But I also didn't want to die. So it was like, I just had to stay in this yucky thing. And eventually, I sat with my feelings long enough, and this is when I was on this discovery of authenticity, of like trying to figure myself out. I realized that I couldn't get rid of it. That was the big mistake. I was trying to get rid of it instead of becoming intimate with it, and seeing that part of myself that was depressed, that was shameful, seeing it for what it was and not actually thinking it was me, separating myself, knowing that it was just a wound, working through the wound, healing. And honestly, it took so much because I was addicted to the suffering. A victim, you know, depression, shame, you're heading towards victimhood here, right? And so I was addicted to the suffering because people would come and try and help me and support me. So I was getting these secret, hidden benefits from it. And so I had to really recognize, okay, I'm being a victim and these people are coming to help me and I'm enjoying that. So I've got to stop them helping me. So it hurt more. And I just had to sit in that. And then day by day, like minute by minute, I had to reorientate myself towards pleasure, towards, even if it was just what can I do or what can I think about that would feel just a little bit better than this feeling I'm feeling now? And so gradually, day by day, minute by minute, I climbed my way out of these negative thoughts, of this hopelessness, of this apathy. And the more I climbed out, it's the snowball effect, right? The more it rolls, the bigger it gets. So I started to roll uphill and collect more momentum. And so it really is, it's like if you tried to push a car, to get it moving is the hard part, but when it's rolling, it's easy. It was like that. And then momentum built. And so it was like a reinforcing cycle of empowerment through really getting clear on what my patterns were that were keeping me there, really getting clear on some beliefs. I had some really conflicting beliefs and fear of judgment, huge fears that I had to work through. With all of that together, it kind of dislodged this grip. And yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, actually. I'm so grateful for it because now I have compassion like I've never had compassion before. And so it's been a gift. It's been an absolute blessing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your honesty. I truly, truly appreciate it. And basically what you did at some point is you took full ownership of everything, of every thought, of every feeling. And what I love about it is that you know, whatever we kind of like resist, persists, and you looked at the things, you know, I believe, and I knew this even at the point when I experienced my depression. I knew this wants to tell me something. I just didn't get it yet. But I knew there's a reason why it's there and it has a message. And as soon as we navigate more on these things and like focus more on, okay, why is this in my life? What does it want to tell me? And so on, instead of pushing it away, that's when we get like learn to see the gift in those experiences. And you share this so beautifully. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that's so wise, Hannah, because I didn't know that at first. I came from the military. It was always just get on with it, like focus on the task, get on with it. And so any feelings were kind of brushed aside, and it was just this mental, if you've ever seen like David Goggins, it's just get rid of all of that and go. And that's how I used to be with all of my successes, but this one was different. Couldn't do that. And so I fought against it for years. To be honest, it was lingering for about 7, 8, maybe 9 years when I stopped competing in sport. That's when I started to lose myself. And, you know, if I had just done what you said earlier, it probably would have been over a lot quicker. But I fought it and fought it and fought it. And the best thing I ever did was tell everyone I was depressed. Not from a place of like victimhood, but more like, oh, I don't have to hide this anymore. I can just get it out. And that was the start of the transition out of the suppression and out of it sort of controlling me, I suppose.
Absolutely. I was now reflecting while you were talking about how I dealt with the shame and what changed it for me. And to me, it was opening up. It was like not, because basically what you're doing is you believe that part of yourself is not good enough, so you hide it. And the more you hide something and the more you try to put it away, like the more it feels like not right because you hide it, right? So once you started like, hey, this is me as well, and you started to open up, and what was a big one for me as well was that I saw I'm loved even though I feel like this. And I don't have to be successful. I don't have to achieve certain things. I don't have to do, even at my lowest point, like my family, my best friends, my husband, like everybody still loves me the same, as if, of course, they want me happy, but they still love me no matter what. And I believe that's where this authenticity and the shame and so on, where it comes like all together, that you learn you are worthy without being that successful person, without the money, without the thing. And I believe that on the core of all of these things is our self-worth and how much we value ourselves, no matter what we do, no matter what we say, no matter even if we do mistakes, even if we can't perform at the level that we expect from ourselves. And I think it all comes down to self-worth. And you mentioned it so often as well, where you said like, yeah, behind the shame, I'm not good enough and so on. So obviously you managed to also build your self-worth independent from all the exterior successes. What helped you on that journey?
So a lot of the work that I've done, it is working with, I call it depolarizing the mind. So the mind, as I said, can either be split into like a negative or positive. And the reason you would have, and so when I say a negative mind, that doesn't mean good or bad. There are just certain characteristics. Like a negative mindset is a contractive, it's introverted, it's shrinking. It is the feeling of not good enough. It's It's actually the feminine aspect, okay? And then the positive isn't good or bad either. Even though people think it's good, it comes with its own problems. This is the negative pole is the dependent, the positive pole is the independent, but you really want to be interdependent. So it's like give and take. You want the yin and the yang, right? And so I knew all of this, and I knew that my mind had been polarized to the negative aspect. That's why I was feeling depression. Depression is a negative. So I say that there's essentially like shame, shame, depression, grief, and then like these are some negative feelings, and then like anger, passion, excitement, pride. These are the positive feelings. And some people question me like, well, why is anger positive? And I say, well, they're not good or bad. They're just positive is like stimulating, moving forward. Negative is suppressive, moving away from. And so I knew all of this, and I could recognize when my mind was negatively charged or positively charged. And so first off, I had to get emotions out of it, because anytime if you're charged negatively, you're going to feel emotion, the emotions of depression, of grief, of shame. And so I had to meditate, sometimes for hours and hours and hours a day, just to bring my mind to a place of equanimity. Because if you try and do transformation work, especially on yourself, when you don't feel safe, when your emotions are running the show, it's futile. You're dealing with the limbic aspects of your brain, and the pain and pleasure, the amygdala, the emotions. So you're not tapped into your prefrontal cortex and higher self. So first step is like get out of survival mode. Get out of survival mode, get into a state of presence. So I did that, and then I reflected on the triggers and things that were polarizing my mind to the negative. And it's always going to come down to past experiences where you've got guilt, where you've got shame, where you think that you've been embarrassed around something. And so I went through and I looked at my past, and I had to, as I said, I call it depolarizing. I went through all of the events and I depolarized them. And I call it there are 6 vectors. There are really 7 vectors, but I teach the 6 vectors at the beginner level that you can really be focusing, which is vector 1 is negative past, vector 2 is positive past, vector 3 is negative present, vector 4 is positive present, vector 5 is future negative, vector 6 is future positive. So fear, for example, is vector 5, future negative. So I was experiencing chronic fear. So I had to clear anything I was scared of out by going through my depolarization process. Present negative, which is vector 3, that would be frustration. It's like when something isn't working now, it's not going the way you want. So I had to clear all of my expectations out around how things should or shouldn't be. And I also had to go back into the past and clear out all of the guilt and shame I had, depolarize all of that, so that my mind, even though I could find equanimity through meditation, you just have to go into daily life and you get triggered and you get pulled off center. So I went through and I looked at all of the things that were really heavily triggering me, my biggest fears, all of those things, and I neutralized the charge on them so that I could really stay in my center, which is a good balance between I am good enough and I'm not good enough. And the words you'd say is just I am. I am who I am. It doesn't need any justification. Like, that's authenticity. So, that was the process. It was center myself and then depolarize these charges that were kept pulling me down to the shame and the depressive states. And through that, you become grounded, because you don't have fears anymore of what might go wrong, like fear of judgment, fear of running out of money, all of these fears that really kept throwing me into the not good enough side. I just had to neutralize them all, and it took a long, long time. But yeah, that's the process, is really looking at the beliefs we have about ourselves, about others. I say to you, answer me this, Hannah. If you had no comparisons, no attachments or resentments, no judgments, and no expectations, what would you feel?
Peace.
Peace, right? You're literally left with peace because your mind goes silent. So I call that the mental cage, CAJE. It's a mental cage: comparisons, attachments, resentments, judgments, expectations. And so when we remove that mental cage that we build through this depolarization process, we're left with peace. And then your soul speaks to you. Your mind isn't in the way, you're not overthinking, you're just peaceful, you're present, and your soul speaks. And that is when synchronicities begin to happen in your life. That's when people come in. That's when you don't even have to go and chase money. That's when it will come to you. That's abundance. When you've removed the cage, you feel so whole, so complete. That is a state of abundance, right? Your health becomes better. You become more prosperous if you value it. Your relationships become a lot healthier. It's just a healthy way to be without always trying to chase someone, or this is how I should be, or I shouldn't be doing that, or I need to do that so I feel loved. Oh, it's a painful way to live, right?
Absolutely. But it's what we're taught. Like the first time I got into like abundance mindset and what it means and so on, like I was like, it's the total opposite of everything we ever learned. We were always like, kind of like, okay, you have this carrot, no matter it's like the money and so on. Like if you want it, you got to chase it basically. But it's the opposite. It's more like everything, like appreciate everything you have in your life. And that will not, because we used to, or like what we were taught is kind of like that you stay where you are, right? If you don't want more. But it's the opposite.
Yes.
If we appreciate everything we have, we flow, like more of it flows into our life. But it's just something our mind cannot like understand. We can't grasp it, I feel. So thank you so much for sharing it.
No, that's cool. And I want to say as well, you just said when you appreciate everything in your life, that's the seventh vector. Remember I said there are 7 vectors? So the 7th vector is when a vector is like an angle. So you've got the 6 and they're all positives and negatives. But what appreciation does energetically, it's not about external. It is an internal feeling where in the moments you feel grateful, you need nothing. Right? And so I say a healed person needs nothing, therefore they have everything. And so what that really means is that when you come into the 7th vector, when you come into abundance, when you appreciate everything in your life, you're in the 7th vector. Your level of empowerment goes through the roof. Your self-worth, its true, real certainty, all of that comes into play, and you become super magnetic. And depending on what your belief systems are around the law of attraction, around the universe, anything that you have a desire for, when you come into the 7th vector, when you come into that state of gratitude, all of that stuff starts to synchronously appear in your life, right? And there was a time during this 3 years of craziness, I had an old mentor, and I resented him for some things. He's a great friend of mine now. I resented him, and I was being a victim, and I had 2 other people that I was leaning on in my victimhood. And I had everything not going my way. And then I realized I was being a victim. I realized I was leaning on these people, and I wrote a letter to my friend saying, I'm sorry, I've been resenting you, I've been blaming you, and it's been keeping me in the victim mindset. So I wrote him a letter, and I sent that to him, and I wrote 2 other letters to these other 2 people, just apologizing for leaning on them so much. And then the next 4 days, here's what happened. I did a post on social media about cryptocurrency, and some people messaged me saying, can you teach me? So I did a big post saying, hey, I'm going to teach some people. Let me know if you want to join in. $200, 4-hour workshop. Let me know. And I had over 100 people register. And it was like, wow, that was abundance. And I didn't even try. Then the next day, I hadn't spoken on stage for over a year. And I had this company reach out to me. And they wanted me to go and speak on one of their stages and sell one of my courses. And a ton more money came in through that as well. And the opportunity was beautiful. And also I used to personal train the actors and actresses when they came to Movie World here on the Gold Coast, and trained some very famous people. And I hadn't done that for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I got a phone call as well from the movie people saying, hey, we've got a famous person coming to town, can you personal train them? I actually said no to that one, but it was like all of this in 4 days was just like, yeah. So that's like a beautiful example of what happens when you become empowered and you go into that seventh vector. You're no longer attached to things. You're no longer fearful. You're no longer like chasing after success. It's things just, I truly believe in, call it God, the universe. If you're a scientist, the quantum field, divinity. I like to use the word the divine. I believe we're all connected energetically. And I say that anytime you have a desire, someone else will be inspired. So your desires create someone else's inspires. And so there's always a balance in the universe. So when you are desiring something, someone else is getting that ready for you right there and then. And the more elevated your I call it emotional tone. So if you are in those states of peace, of gratitude, of love, the more empowered you are, the stronger that signal to the divine. And so if you're truly grateful, truly empowered, then your requests are going to come back very, very rapidly. And it is, like you said, it's not I'm going to go out there searching for it. You know, everyone, even anyone listening now, and I know you know this, Hannah, it's like, how many people have had coincidences occur or people come into their life like at just real weird times that's changed the complete direction of their life, or taught them a lesson, or been there for them, or you know, given them something that has had a profound effect on where they are now. And everyone's had that. And when you start noticing it happening all the time, you can't call it a coincidence anymore. That is the result of something you're doing. And so authenticity is, like you said, a big thing I sort of teach and I'm into. Your authentic self is your higher self. Like, it is the empowered version of you. So the more authentic you can be, the more magic is going to happen in your life, you know?
So that's what I love about manifestation. You know, I feel like this is a buzzword currently, and so many people are talking about it. And then there is 10,000 techniques. You just got to write it down to, I don't know, 3, 6, 9 times. But what it actually is like you become the next version of yourself, a higher version of yourself, that version who has all these things. And what I love about manifesting and this whole topics and whatever we want to manifest in life, it actually comes down to who you are again. Who, like, your personality and what the next more empowered version of yourself is. And mostly then, again, kind of like I want to close the circle of like the feeling that most people might now have is, okay, I got to achieve more. I got to be better. Da, da, da. And mostly it's letting go. It's letting go of beliefs that don't serve us. It's an act of surrendering more than, again, doing more. And that's what I find so beautiful about this whole personal development journey, that like layer for layer, we're allowed to let go these things and become who we are at our core. And I find you are such a perfect example as well of, as said, we have a lot of similarities in our journey. And I was very, very much in my masculine energy as well as a woman. So I know everything as out of a perspective, and I know so many women who are, because we have a male society right now, you know, you got to do more, be more, and so on. And like feeling emotions, surrendering, letting go, receiving is not very appreciated by our society. And I find you are such a wonderful, beautiful example of a male tapping more as well into the female energy, which doesn't make you anyhow less male or something like this, but you're like, as you always say, the yin and yang. And that's when you become peaceful, because you can experience both. And as long as you resent one, the other one, like, there's no balance. So thank you so much for sharing your wonderful journey and all your wisdom.
It's my pleasure, Hannah. Thank you so much for having me.
I have one last question while you were talking. You said you kind of decentralized the charge, right?
Depolarized.
Yes. How do we do that?
Well, you'll have to come to my workshop and I'll show you. It is it's a healing method that I call it healing. Put whatever word you want in there. It's a method I've designed to essentially any event or memory we have, we're going to remember it for one of two reasons. It was good or it was bad, right? We don't remember something that was just neutral. If you had a delicious meal, you're going to remember it because it was good. The day you got married, you're going to remember it. The day you broke up with your partner and you were on the back foot, you're going to remember it because it hurt. But in every single moment, there is also people would call it a silver lining or a blessing or a gift. And so I've got a series of questions that I've designed, and it involves meditation as well, that will essentially depolarize any future projections. So that's imagination or past memories. So yeah, that's the process. It is about going and seeing what is pulling you into one of, because you've got to even depolarize the positive vectors as well. If you've got a fantasy about something, like a lot of people want to earn all this money, but if you chase the rabbit runs away. So having an attachment to money is going to keep people poor. So if I ever run like a wealth training, I depolarize people's attachment to money. And so then it's not like it doesn't rule them. They already feel abundant. They already have enough. Cool. Now they're going to receive that money. There's also things in the past where we've been really proud. And if we're super proud, we're going to have fears. We're going to have shame really drives pride. So pulling yourself off that pedestal. So we'll go to vector 2, past positive, and we'll look at, something an achievement they're proud of. And this sounds really contradictory to people, but we have to go back and pull ourselves off that pedestal, because if we don't, we're setting ourselves up for a future downfall. If we've put ourselves up higher than we are, we're setting ourselves up for a future downfall. And so your mind, if you live in pride, your mind is in the realm of like, I'm better than you, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. And if you take that to the extreme, you become like a tyrant. Like you become dominant. And then the masses that you're dominating are going to come and they're going to attack you. Like, so by pulling ourselves off the pedestal, bringing ourselves back to center, humbling ourselves, that positive no longer has this unconscious way of controlling us. We're literally guided by our soul. So yeah, the depolarization process maybe depending on the strength of the charge, because it's not black and white. There are degrees to how strong that emotion grips someone. For me, it was really strong. And this is where like bipolar comes in, is when you have, essentially we've all got whenever we have mood swings, we're a little bit bipolar, right? Depending on our mood. But if the charge is strong, that's when you're going into like bipolar label territory. If it's really strong, you'd be schizophrenic. But essentially it's all the same thing, just the degree to which you're triggered or the charge is, and you become a different persona or personality and a different emotion controls you. Sometimes the depolarization process can take quite a while. And especially if there are multiple fears holding you in one place, or multiple, embarrassments or shameful things. So yeah, that didn't really answer you, because the process is a process. But it is a matter of seeing the good and the bad and the bad and the good. And when you do that through this process, you come into that state of equanimity, you come into a state of peace and presence, and you come into a state of authenticity.
And for everybody who got curious now to work with you, where can we find you to do the depolarization process with you?
I would say jump in and do my free course. That is called Discover Your Authentic Self. And just go to ruthlessauthenticity.com, ruthlessauthenticity.com. Go through that. Let me know how you go. My social media, I don't know if you're going to put it with this anywhere, but it's John Templeton Official, Facebook or Instagram, and connect with me. I like just to connect. So send me a message, say you heard the interview, and yeah, let's connect.
Wonderful. I will put everything in the show notes so everybody knows exactly where to find you and it's directly linked. And again, to you, a huge thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your authenticity. I feel like that's what the world needs, and real humans with all aspect, all like the whole journey that is just in the end being human. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your lovely personality. You're very beautiful, and for putting this on. I mean, it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to know from you, what was your biggest takeaway and how can you put it into action starting now? Leave a comment below or hop over to Instagram at @HannahWiz_ and leave a comment under the post of today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and never forget to shine your light.